What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Progress Podcast, the podcast where we share with young people that they do have a purpose and that progress is possible for you in your life. Today, I'm really excited to be joined again by my friend Jordan Lally. I'll just give you a chance, if you would like to, Jordan, to introduce yourself for our listeners.
Jordan Lally. I am meditation teacher, mental health advocate, and singer-songwriter for the band The Big Infinite. I'm also founder and director of a mental health and suicide prevention nonprofit called the Lally Foundation. That's about me.
Yeah. For those of you who might not have heard, I have had the chance to sit down and talk with Jordan in the past. And you really are an incredible soul. I love the work that you do and the message that you put out into the world. Just before joining this interview, I was listening to one of your songs, I Am Love.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's a good introduction for you. Kind of the chorus of that song is I am love before anything else. And that certainly is true of you.
That's very kind of you to say. That's certainly what I'm aspiring to. Um, yeah, and everything I do, because for so long in my life, everything else got in the way, particularly my thoughts and emotions and everything external sort of kept that truth hidden from me, or kept me from allowing to live my life in a way where I'm expressing that truth more fully. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for those listening who might not be so familiar with your story, you're a rock star in many senses, but you've literally lived a rock star life. Would you want to share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I started as a professional musician at 27 years old. So I got a really late start because social anxiety. I just couldn't bring myself to sing out loud. So got my degree in psychology and then went to recording school and was recording other bands just because I wanted to be involved in music, but was just the anxiety was just ever present. Uh, Eventually at 27, I got the nerve to sing out loud, got a band together, and we spent about 6.5 years touring the US, um, doing the 360-degree rock star thing. Rock star we can use liberally here. Some of the shows were very glamorous and festivals in California for thousands of people. Others were empty bar gigs. We did the whole nine yards, lived out of a van. Um, but yeah, we were having some great progress and really making great strides for a while there as a typical rock band.
Yeah. And what you do now is a little bit different, but certainly still really like cool. It has the cool aspect to it, and it's got some real meaning and fulfills a purpose for you. Would you want to share about kind of what is typical of your work now?
Yeah, so we were pedal to the metal, just like I said, doing the band thing. And then back in 2014, I lost my dad, Ed Lally, to a battle of clinical depression. So it culminated in suicide. And at that point, just I just didn't have it in me anymore to live my life the way I was living it, and to pursue my career the way that I was pursuing it, which was just nothing was ever fulfilling, right? It was always, once I achieved an objective, it was always, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? So, and there was that next thing was unending, and so I was forever unfulfilled and unworthy, or feeling as such. And so my dad passed, and I took quite a while just a break, just step back from music altogether, and did a lot of introspection and really got proactive about my mental health. And two things really started to dominate my life. One was just honesty, just being truthful to myself and to everybody in my life. And that began with being honest about my mental health struggles, depression, social anxiety, as I said. And then the other piece of the puzzle was meditation. I started a dedicated daily practice of meditation the day after my dad's funeral. And so both of those practices really informed what ultimately became the trajectory of our band nowadays and the work that we do. So we're still a rock band. We still record and release music. But instead of touring and playing bars and clubs and festivals and concert venues, we now visit schools, community organizations, military bases, and we play our music, and we also do a lot of storytelling and share proactive mental health resources and suicide prevention resources like the 988 number and those sort of things. And particularly at schools, the purpose of the music is really it's interwoven throughout the speaking to really keep the students engaged and allow us to share our message, in a different way, in a way that sometimes can resonate, deeper, on an emotional level. So that's the long and the short of what we're doing nowadays. We're still playing music, but yeah, it's very different. Right? We often joke that, like, 10 years ago, we were playing, gigs, clubs, festivals till 2 a.m. Thousands of people. And nowadays, sometimes we're waking up. And so we played till 2 a.m. We wouldn't get back to the hotel till 3 or 4 in the morning. Nowadays, sometimes we're waking up at 4 in the morning to go play a middle school cafeteria. So it's slightly less glamorous on the surface, but tremendously more fulfilling. Yeah,
You're playing the show at 2 p.m. instead.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I kind of have been taking us on the fast track here, and I hope for those listening who are interested, you'll review our previous interview together because you share a little bit more in depth on what that journey has been for you. But I've been moving kind of quickly because I'd really love to dive into kind of some of the more recent projects that you've been involved in, particularly the Eddie Boy campaign. That was really, I'm sure, a beautiful, fulfilling experience for you and a really an opportunity of healing for a lot of people. Would you like to share some on that?
Yeah, in some respects, it's like a microcosm of what I just shared, where it's like I went on this personal healing journey through truth and meditation, and then that informed the trajectory of our band and this school program that we do, the Power of Expression. That has sort of lived out another cycle with Eddie Boy, so Eddie Boy is a song that we just released, on all streaming platforms a couple weeks back. And lyrically, it is the expression of um, my journey through the grief process. Suicide grief is very different than typical grief, thanks to the stigma that exists in our society, and so it complicates that grief experience for a lot of people because they don't have oftentimes they don't have the same support from those around them because people don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to approach it. They don't know what to say. There's still the belief that suicide is a conscious choice, and that there's blame, or there's just a lot of stuff that surrounds it. So the song kind of lyrically unfolds from me, receiving, word that my father had passed, and then through the realization process that unfolded for me, which is um, recognizing, and it seems simple on the surface, but ultimately I think it's really powerful, that the brain is an organ just like the heart. And so we understand in our society that the heart is an organ. And so if you have an unhealthy heart, you know that you can exercise, you can eat healthier, you can talk to a doctor, you can talk openly about it. There's things that you can do. But when we experience an unhealthy brain, we have symptoms of an unhealthy brain like depression and anxiety, a lot of times we don't speak openly about it. We feel this shame, and so we hide those feelings. Uh, but in truth, we can talk openly. We can see a psychologist. We can tap into things like meditation and mindfulness and breath work, these things that can tangibly improve the structure and function of our brain. The brain is an organ just like the heart. And how that layers into the suicide loss experience is that there's the belief that suicide is a conscious choice from a healthy mind. And even us, who lose someone close to us, like we struggle with that. Like, did my dad choose to leave me? But the long and the short of it is that um, it's just the results. It's the culmination of a mental health disorder, of a brain disease. It's not a conscious choice from an unhealthy, from a healthy mind. It's the result of an unhealthy mind, a mental health disorder. And it just resolves that way, in the same way a heart attack could resolve in you losing somebody, an experience of severe depression or anxiety. These experiences can unfold in that way. And that is something that we wanted to share. I share it often in suicide loss support groups that I lead and in retreats that I facilitate. And it's probably the one piece of understanding that I relate to people that it continues to come up in conversation. And so I'll lead a support group retreat and meetings, and then we'll have subsequent ones, and new people will come who just lost somebody, and then people who have been attending the group for a few months, they'll, Jordan mentioned that, and this really helped me, that the brain is an organ just like the heart. And so you just keep that in mind. Obviously you still have to go through the grief process, and there's still plenty of tears to shed and all the emotions, anger, all that stuff. But just holding onto that little kernel was something that we wanted to share to others beyond our immediate network here in Maryland. And so we use the song. That message is embedded in the song, the lyrics of the song. And we created, in conjunction with the Ed Lally Foundation, a series of videos. And the videos featured 30 seconds of the song, this particular lyric that shares that message, and these pictures that we received from all these suicide loss survivors. So it's them and their loved ones. And so the videos are just these powerful, uh, literally pictures of just people who have lost a loved one. And it just shares that message with lost survivors. And we started that campaign on Survivors Day, November 23rd. And so far, we've been able to reach the videos have reached over 40,000 views, and we've had thousands of meaningful interactions with suicide loss survivors. And the comment sections on these social media feeds has become like a virtual support group. It's like it's been it's exceeded our expectations, and it's been this really beautiful, powerful experience. It's been awesome.
Yeah, good work. Yeah, what a gift to be a part of that healing journey for so many other people.
Yeah, it really is a gift, and I don't think I would have ever recognized it as such, on the outside looking in, but to be in those moments with people, to be able to be blessed to be in that moment with them, or I mean, even more so for me personally, to be able to write a song that resonates in that way. Like that's
Yeah,
even when we were playing cool guys up on stage, festivals, like trying to look the part. Like that's all I ever really wanted was for my lyrics or those words that are or the music that's blessed to sort of pass through me, to be expressed through me, to be able to resonate with people like that. Like that's why I love music. That's what music did for me when I was really lost and struggling. When I was in college and I thought drinking was the answer, and I was really lost, in a really dark place. I would listen to Sublime, my favorite band of all time, and just the words would give me just this little glimmer of hope, that maybe there was, something through this darkness whenever I made my way through.
yeah, that is real impact. It's not quantifiable in the same way. I love what you shared about how the brain is an organ just like the heart. And it's simple when you say it like that, but oftentimes I find myself forgetting. I was with a group of elementary school students involved in the Hope Squad program, Hope for Utah, here in Provo. And uh, the way that they understand the program is really beautiful because it's really simple. They understand that there are folks who are hurting and who are sick, and they need our support. They need our friendship. And many times they might need to borrow our hope and lean on us for some perspective. And so you do that in a wonderful way. And I think these little kids do as well.
I got chills just as you said that. Like that's beautiful, and that's uh, what I guess you're experiencing is what I experience with my daughters. I have two young daughters. Well, they're getting a little bit older, but one's still in second grade and sixth grade, and I've talked to them openly about this stuff, age appropriately, but openly enough. And they have that simple understanding that I didn't have because, my generation and those before me was so much stigma there, but they just understand, like you said, the people are sick and they just need a little support, need a little love, like, that we can help them out just with that. And that's enough. It doesn't have to be this taboo thing that we can't talk about and we got to sort of hide in the darkness.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I would love to hear from you, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, about who Ed Lally is and what your experience was like um, during that time when he's struggled and then has now passed on to the next part of his journey.
I really appreciate you asking that. I've done many interviews, over the years, and I don't think anybody's asked so directly about my dad. So thank you. My dad, Ed Lally, was amazing. He was my soccer coach as a kiddo. He was the best man at my wedding. He was the biggest fan of our band. He would come out to all the shows. I remember when I would play like solo gigs, where I'm playing acoustic at a bar till 2 a.m. Sometimes he would just, even if he had to wake up at 6 a.m. for work, he would drive with me an hour to however far I was going, an hour away, and then just be the only guy there sitting there singing along every word. So that's who he was when he was healthy. Um, and just a joyful soul. He struggled with depression, and it only manifested really once every decade or so. He had this real tremendous ability to repress and shove everything down, and our culture and our family was not to talk about anything. And so I actually first found out about his struggles with depression when I was 25 years old. That was on my birthday. I showed up to my house. It was supposed to be a birthday party. My dad was missing. And my family and I spent the next 24 hours driving around, just losing hope with every passing hour, just trying to find any sight of him. We didn't know we just thought he had been like abducted or something. It was so crazy. Uh, and we got a call from the police the next morning that they'd found him. He had checked into a hotel and attempted. And so we rushed to the hospital. And uh, when I had the chance to walk back and see him, he never uttered the words that he had attempted suicide. But he had a hospital wristband on, and he kept fidgeting with it. I noticed that he had these superficial wounds on his wrist that he was trying to hide. And the only thing he said to us was, we don't need to talk about this. I'm okay. It was just, some messed up medication. And at the time, I was okay with that. Like I didn't want to go there. If I had to look at my dad's vulnerability, that meant I had to look at my own as well. So so yeah, we swept it under the rug for another 9 years, and he didn't get really struggle with depression for another 9 years. He had this. He sort of it took him a couple months to dig his way out of that experience. But it's amazing, like the capacity for denial when you really want to. Like our whole family just, oh, we're fine. Oh, it's good. Yeah, and we just kept marching along. And yeah, and then 9 years later, his depression was always tied to his business. So financial ebbs and flows with his. Ran a small business. And so we had, bump in the road financially speaking. And uh, there was this amazing dichotomy because one day we actually hired, we didn't pay him, but we got my dad to be the star in a music video that we did for our band. And he was like a Will Ferrell type. He was just silly and it was a great. And the next day, the next morning, he got this unexpected bill or lost a client. I can't remember the details of whatever it was associated with the business. And it was just like off a cliff. His whole demeanor just dropped and his face was sunken in. And for the next 12 months, he was just severely depressed. And the biggest marker I can give you of his depression is he loved to eat. And that was his great joy in life, as his only vice. He wasn't a drinker or anything like that. He just loved his food. And he lost 100 pounds over the next year because he was so on this anxious hamster wheel that he would just forget to eat. He just couldn't even get him to. I would try to get, why don't we go here, go there? I want to pick you up this, pizza for me. Whatever. Just didn't even care about it. Just wanted to keep talking about his business. And so that experience of that last year is is one of the things that I attribute to my ability to navigate the suicide loss experience with seemingly greater ease than I see some other folks because I got to watch him. I got to watch his brain become diseased basically before my very eyes. It wasn't one of those things where he hit it and he was with me and everything was happy and then he just disappeared the next day and that was it. I got to watch the organ of his brain just deteriorate. Um, and it really was, heartbreaking, of course, but it was also enlightening because I saw these habits, that he would vocalize of his brain, these hamster wheel thoughts of just unending circles, spirals, and I wasn't thinking about the same thing, but my brain was doing the same thing. He was worried about the printing industry. That was he had a small printing company. I was worried about the music business, but my thoughts would be obsessive in the same way. And so watching that unfold, that's really what revealed to me that the brain's an organ and my brain's doing the same thing. And it's just this habit of my brain. It's not really who I am. Like to harken back to the beginning of our conversation, I am love. These are just habitual thoughts, and I've come to find out that we can address those thoughts. But so that's the dichotomy of my dad. He was joyful, happy, best buddy, best friend, but he struggled, mightily with mental health, and he had zero tools to address his mental health, to cope, to heal, to anything. And with the exception of seeing some doctors here and there, and it's I'm sure as many people understand the hardest part when you're sort of reliant totally on a psychologist or a therapist is finding a good one, someone that resonates with you. We just never found one for him that really was able to enact any sort of meaningful healing transformation for his experience with mental health.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being courageous and vulnerable to share that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard to know you now and look at you now and think back that years ago you were hard. It was hard for you to look at your own vulnerability or your dad's vulnerability.
It was like, yeah, I mean, I just talked about the dichotomy of my dad, but
Yeah.
I representative of the same thing, but it's just night and day. You know, there was a person who was completely performative. It was, I will show you what I think the version of me that Noah wants to see, and I will show this person over here the version, you know, and every interaction was just superficial. I'm just going to show you what I think you want to see, but nobody's ever going to really see the real me. Um, and that was how my anxiety played itself out, you know. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's so much freer and so much nicer just to show up in every conversation and just be able to be me, and you could take,
Yes.
you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. Here I am.
I'd love to dive in more to that in a moment about how we can kind of unify those fragmentations of ourselves. But I noticed something as you shared this story today in a light that I never have. It seems almost to me that your dad was a victim to two different forces. One was mental illness, and to a large degree, we don't get to choose when we are going to experience that. We can do some things to set ourselves up and care for ourselves and combat that. But the other villain that he was a victim to is almost uglier in some ways, and it's the stigma. The fact that he just didn't feel comfortable in our society
Yeah.
to accept help or to reach for it. What are some things that we can do to uh, get rid of that stigma?
I think vulnerability is the word, right? The more that we lead with vulnerability, the more that we invite that from others, and then we forge these relationships, whether familial or friendships or community relationships that are forged on honesty and vulnerability, and there's nothing performative about it, you know. And the more that we do that in these small moments, you know, in this conversation, I think it's just going to take a myriad of those moments stacking one on top of the other to really break down the stigma. um, you know, it's nice when a song can help maybe break down that stigma, a podcast, yeah, any platform we can bring those conversations to. But I think it just I think the stigma exists purely because of fear of vulnerability. You know, it's and the one thing that I've the powerful thing, well, one of many, but perhaps the most powerful thing I've experienced over the last decade doing this sort of work and leading with vulnerability is the countless conversations I have had with people from all walks of life who willingly tell me and share with me in these beautiful moments that they are struggling, they have struggled, someone near and dear to them is struggling, and so I'm in this position where I'm blessed to be constantly reminded that I'm not alone, that a lot of people are struggling, that the stigma is just that. It's not real. It's not a real thing. You know, it's just this lie that's pervasive, you know.
Yeah.
Vulnerability
Uh,
is the long and short of it.
yeah. I want to let our listeners know. I don't know if they can tell. And I also want to let you know this, Jordan. I feel different when I talk with you. I think you leading with that vulnerability, it gives me not only permission to be vulnerable as well, but I almost feel this sense that like if I am uh, disingenuous in any way, you can tell. Like you can know, you can see through it. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think it's a powerful sense because it feels like an invitation to be real. And at the same time, I have like complete trust that when I am real, I'll be accepted. So thank you for bringing that energy.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That trust, that's like that's I guess maybe that's the thing that's going to break down the stigma as we start to learn that we can trust one another. Like if we're putting this truth out there, if we're putting this vulnerability out there, like we can trust one another to hold, like you said earlier when you're talking to the kids, like we can support one another. I can hold this moment of weakness for you if you'll do the same for me, and then together we have more strength than we could have had individually. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I attended a summer camp once. Um, and it's just a special environment of vulnerability and sharing and meeting new people. And I'm sure you experienced maybe some similar feelings in the retreats. And and things that you're a part of. But after the end of this summer camp, the only way I could describe it or visualize it was as if I was a little tree sprouting these new green and tender leaves. And sometimes in the world, when we are growing and discovering new parts of ourselves, uh, they are quick to be chopped off or cut down or mocked, and it can stunt our growth. But here in this environment, I felt like every new thing I tried, every time I reached for maybe a piece of growth, I was kind of enshrouded or cocooned in like this just huge acceptance and love, and all the people around me, instead of mocking me, they were cheering for me or like championing me, just lifting me up. And
Yeah.
I think that feeling we can actually recreate that anywhere once we learn how.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's certainly been my experience. I was a little tree out there who had stopped even trying to grow because I was so afraid of being chopped down. I didn't put myself in any vulnerable or any uncomfortable circumstance for like 2 decades. Um, and as I've, gingerly started to grow some limbs out there, I have found that, like you said, like it's I don't know what the magical component is. I don't know if it's you put yourself in circumstances where people, with the different sort of people that will lift you up or support you in those moments, or whether it's your energy that invites that from everyone, or whatever's going on beyond my ability to comprehend. But um, whenever you kind of go out there on that limb, or you are that limb, um, it just seems as though there is someone or something beautiful to kind of support you and allow that growth. And then the more you expand your comfort zone in that way, it just becomes sort of this unending process. Whether it's something that's sort of become like a mantra of mine. Just constantly trying to expand my comfort zone, whether it's physically and taking like an ice bath or something, like meditating in the snow, in my bathing suit, or emotionally, a big marker for me in my social anxiety was about a year and a half after I lost my dad. A year and a half into my meditation practice, I went and started doing improv classes. So that
Mm.
felt tremendously vulnerable. But there were all these people there to support me. These people in a gym, basement gym in Baltimore City who I'd never met before. And I'm doing jazz hands and, doing silly stuff. And they're just like there to support me and lift me up. Um, or even intellectually, like to put an idea out there, or express yourself in a way that maybe people aren't saying that, or it's not okay to say that right now. That when you do, willingly put yourself out there, yeah, there's always kind of somebody to catch you. So yeah, I love that. No, like we can take that summer camp vibe. It's just there
Yeah.
for us wherever we go. Yeah.
There's something about the laws of nature that rewards truth. Truth prevails.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, it does.
Was was it only when you started to recognize your dad's decline that your own tendency toward anxiety or depression you started to recognize that? Or tell me about that journey.
So it was I believe it was unfolding the entire last year of his life, but it didn't there was no realization until a few hours after he passed. My bandmates and I were on tour in Florida, and I got the call from my wife that my dad had passed away. And she told me pretty directly, your dad died and it was suicide, and I just collapsed. Um, and my bandmates were right there. They caught me, they carried me into our tour van, and they drove me through the night from Central Florida back to Northern Maryland. So it was like 17 hours in the tour van. And for 17 hours straight, I cried. And I had never been vulnerable in front of my bandmates in any way, shape, or form. And I certainly had never cried in front of them. But for 17 hours, that's exactly what I did. And those gentlemen, they just loved me and supported me and were there in the most beautiful way possible from through that experience and every day since. Um, and I got home and I walked in side, and I hugged my wife, my mom. And at a certain point, my mom said, through her tears, what are we going to do? What are we going to tell people? And that was a fair question because we hadn't told anybody the truth. So essentially, she was saying, how are we going to lie about this suicide thing? Um, and I don't know what came over me, but I just said the truth. Um, and I held to that. I walked out to the back corner of our yard where my father had lost his life, and I walked out there by myself, and there was this piece of crime scene tape on the ground. The police said, they have this standard procedure; they have to rule it before they rule it a suicide. And so they had left this little shard of crime scene tape behind, and I reached down to pick it up. And the inclination, and I remember this vividly, was I'm going to put this in my pocket and I'm going to hide it. I'm going to hide this thing that happened. If I can hide this crime scene tape, essentially, I'm hiding the entire experience. And in that moment, the entire realization, I guess, that had been dawning over that last year hit me. And I just had this, I call it the great wake up call in my life. This beautiful moment of clarity. It was like the house of cards collapsed. All the ego, all the anxiety, all the depression just collapsed. And not that it disappeared, but I just saw it clearly. And I was fully present, birds above my head and the blue sky. And it was just like this moment of profound peace, in a spot where, less than 12 hours earlier, my dad had died. It made no sense. It didn't stand to reason. Um, and in that isolated experience of an hour or however long it was, a year's worth, I think, or maybe a lifetime's worth of realization dawned on me. Uh, and it stayed with me in this most beautiful way for a few days until the funeral proceedings were over. And then everybody left, and I'm sure anybody who's lost somebody can relate to this. Like it's like you're kind of carried by everybody's support and by the busyness of having to make funeral arrangements, and then the dust settles, and then I was just left with the depression that was always there, the self-medication, the social anxiety, and then the grief of my father. But I had that realization and I had that experience and I had that. It was like the aperture had opened and it was trying to close, but it couldn't close completely. And so I held on to that. And that's really what fueled my meditation practice. Uh, and which essentially for me is just a prayer experience. But instead of talking to God, I'm listening. Um, and I just kept listening. And then day by day, month by month, year by year, just kind of continues to open back up to whatever that experience was that day, the day, a couple hours after my dad passed.
What gave you the idea to meditate the day after the funeral?
Um, I was at my dad's, what do they call it, viewing.
Yeah.
So a couple days before the funeral, and an old friend of his came with a book under his arm. It's called Proof of Heaven. And he came to give it to my mom. He handed it to my mom. It was meant to console her, but she was not in any
Yeah.
place to be consoled. So she just, thanked him for it politely enough through her tears and then handed it off to me. And I took it home and I read it the next, I don't know how many days it was, 2 or 3 days between the viewing and the funeral. I read it cover to cover. And it was about, it was a, memoir of a neurosurgeon who had had a near-death experience. He was in a coma for 7 days and he had this experience that he describes as heaven. Um, and nothing really about the book, at least at the time, resonated with me too much, except for the fact that when he said when he returned to his everyday life after this 7 day experience of heaven, the closest thing that approximated the peace he had experienced in that coma, in that near death experience, was meditation. Uh, and so whatever that was, it just stuck with me, and so I just decided I knew I had to do something. I knew that my brain was likely to follow a similar trajectory to my father's unless I intervened.
Yeah.
And this seemed like a well enough intervention. And so I just started to meditate, and I was too anxious to go to a class and at the time there weren't many resources online. So I just, made every mistake you could possibly make, which I think now helps inform me to be a better meditation teacher. And then, yeah, the blessing I had was the memory of my father to propel me forward, both the good and the bad.
Wow. You really utilize a lot of tools now to support your mental health with that self-awareness of maybe what some genetic predisposition might be. What are some of those tools that are most helpful for you, or maybe what are some that might be helpful for our listeners?
Yeah, I like to believe that mental health is this unending process of nature and nurture, right? We have natural dispositions, but my experience has been the more that I bring nurture into it. Like I can nurture my nature,
Yeah.
and I can change it, and I have changed it tremendously. So, and it's even down to the DNA. Our DNA can express itself in different ways. Well, my DNA is expressing itself in a very different way than it was a decade ago. Meditation is the primary, the centerpiece. I'm meditating every morning without fail. But I'm also big on, I should lay this out there initially. I'm big on things being meeting ourselves where we're at. We don't need
Hmm.
to have this lofty expectation. I must meditate 20 minutes a day, and if I don't do that, it's pass or fail. No.
Hmm.
So I'm going to meditate every morning. There are mornings where, because of how things unfolded, whatever I got to do, I only have 5 minutes. Some mornings I have 20, 30 minutes. But I'm going to start my day with that meditation. And that is a non-negotiable. But the duration is negotiable because I want to create positive momentum for my day and for my life. And this is what I teach to folks. Like, uh, if you create the positive momentum, that's what we're after, right? We don't need the lofty expectation. We just want the positive momentum. So if you want to start a meditation practice, start with 2 minutes a day, 2 minutes every morning. If that's what you need to do to get yourself going, then absolutely do that. And I teach meditation, very different styles, sort of combined as one. It's really it's something I call mindful mental health, and it's really three parts of. The first is breath work, so we're doing some sort of breathing practice. And I could get in the weeds with that, but basically it's just we have this ability to influence our nervous system, and our nervous system largely dictates our experiences of stress and anxiety and depression, or our mental health at any given moment. So we can assert some influence there just by slowing down our breathing, extending our exhalation. So my meditations start with some breath work, and then we get into some mindfulness, which is just connecting with your body, connecting with your senses, just connecting with the present moment. And then I close out my meditations with gratitude. So there I'm targeting the emotional centers of my brain. I'm offsetting the negativity bias that we all inherently have as virtue of being a human being who needed to survive and traipsing through the woods trying to survive saber-toothed tigers, right? We needed to assume that every stick was a snake to keep ourselves alive, because even if we were wrong 99 times, that one time we were right was life-saving. We now still have that same negativity bias. We just project it now out into our sort of mental, emotional challenges. And so I think it's so important to offset that through a conscious practice of gratitude. So I close every meditation that way. So those three elements: breath work, mindfulness, connecting with your breath, your body, the present moment, and gratitude. Um, that's what I like to bring into every meditation if time allows. But those three tools individually can be tremendously impactful for any one of your viewers, listeners. Um, Gratitude can come in a meditation as I do it. It can come, in just a list that you write down. It can come as part of a prayer. It can come like I do it with my kiddos when I put them to bed at night. What are three things that happened today that you're grateful for? And you just make this habit of talking about it, and then you have this habit of looking at it and noticing it and everyday experiences. Um, yeah, so again, I could get in the weeds with this stuff, but hopefully that's sort of an
Oh,
overview.
I love that. And that pattern, there's, like you mentioned, there's some flexibility in there that we can find what works for us. I think that's really important. Improv, you mentioned that as being one of your tools, and that's surprising to me. But at the same time, when I think about it, if you want to explore what's inside you, improv might be a wonderful way because it'll bring out, whatever is going on. You just have to you have to improvise.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Do you go ahead?
I I I studied improv for a year, and it became something that I would teach in meditation classes, and I would just call it social meditation. And we would do these improv games where you stand in a circle. Improv forces you into the present moment, just like meditation. And one of the fundamental rules of improv is yes and.
Yeah,
So that's acceptance, right? I'm going to accept, like that's what we're taught, through our faith, through meditation, through everything is acceptance, and it's all you could just learn in an improv class. Like, yes, I say yes to the present moment, and I can build from there if I want to seek some change or improvement or transformation. But if I'm stuck in a state of resistance saying, no, it can't be that way, well, then I'm not moving forward in any way, shape, or form. So we got to start with that yes, and then we can move forward towards our heart desire. So yes, improv is something I don't get to practice as much, but I absolutely love it. We just did a suicide loss survivors retreat, and it's the third annual one, and it's the second year in a row I've done improv at a suicide loss survivors retreat. And most people are like, "What? You're what? That doesn't add up. But we divide the day into sort of we do the heavy emotional lifting in the morning, support group stuff, conversation, shedding tears. And in the afternoon, we give these folks, these beautiful human beings, the opportunity to and the permission to like be okay and to laugh. And we end our day just laughing and sort of stepping out of uh, who we think we should be and just into whatever the present moment invites us to be in these silly, silly improv games.
Oh, that's beautiful. Those retreats, if somebody's interested in being a part of one of those, what do they need to do?
You could just visit edlallyfoundation.org. We currently have a it's called a men's mindful mental health, but a men's group. We have a women's mindful mental health group, a women's group, and we have a suicide loss survivors group. Those meetings are both in person and virtual. So we serve our local community here in Maryland, but then we also have people across the nation that join certain of those meetings. And then we hold our retreats for those groups once or twice a year. We're going to look at hosting some just sort of regular retreats that are just open ended to any population that would like to join us. But right now, those are the retreats that we offer, and all those information on those groups and retreats and everything we do through the foundation is available at the website edlallyfoundation.org.
Wonderful. Yeah. I invite all you who may be listening to check out that website. Also, please stream the song. Really beautiful message. And checking out those videos, see the healing and the joy of other folks who are survivors of suicide loss. Just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I want to share with you, Jordan, how grateful I am for you and the time we've got to share together today. And I get the sense um, how proud your dad must be of you
Yeah.
and what you're doing. And also the investment that you're making in your kids, that's going to have a huge influence as well. I mean, even beyond the time that you get to be here on this earth, the the memorial that you've made for your dad and for others like him who have lost their lives to mental illness, it's really making a difference and bringing hope. So thank you.
Well, that's very touching and beautiful, and I really appreciate that, Noah. Um, I wanted to say to you the impact that you've had on me over the long term, but over the last month, actually, we reconnected maybe a few weeks back, and you regularly pop up on my Instagram feed. But that message that progress is possible is something that I needed to hear, and I need particularly over this last month. I have I've written a book, and it probably took me 3.5 years to write it. It's called The Lost Way Home, and I brought it out to some publishers last spring, and there was some interest, but there was also like this basically like, hey, guy, nowadays if you don't have 30,000 followers on Instagram, we're not going to publish your book, kind of a thing. And part of my depressive stuff that I work through is that sort of resistance, right? In certain areas, I meet a challenge, like my dad's passing, and I can just thrive through it. And in other areas, particularly when it revolves around creative endeavors, my depression likes to live in that space. And so, a big challenge for me that I've put on myself over the last 2 months, really a month and a half or so, is like, okay, I'm gonna start some YouTube channel, a YouTube channel, Instagram channel with the same title as my book, and I'm going to build my following in 6 months or a year so that I can become undeniable and have this book that I believe in be published. And the timeliness of that message that you deliver, I cannot tell you how many times your face has popped up on my feed, and that's the message you've been saying directly, or it's just the handle, that I'm seeing for your podcast. It has meant the world to me, and it's really propelled me forward. And I've actually done probably not definitely more steps in terms of the social media end of what I want to do for my book and laying the framework for that. And it's largely because you're pushing me forward. So it really means a lot to me, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for bringing that message to the world and to me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of strange that we're two guys sitting in front of a computer to have a conversation and to share a message, but that message is what it's all about. And this is just the medium that it can travel to folks. And that I know is what we're both after is the impact on an individual. one person's life.
Yeah.
Tell us again, it's Lost Way Home.
Yeah, the book's The Lost Way Home, and the YouTube
Okay.
channel is The Lost Way Home. I just started it a couple weeks back. I'm going to be, I have started to upload meditations there, some mental health insights, a lot of stuff we've talked about in this conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's my goal. And I converted my Jordan Lally Instagram to The Lost Way Home, and so that's what I'm going to put my effort and energy in. When anytime I feel my depressive neural networks trying to flood my mind with doubt, I'm just going to remember that progress is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. That's humbling. I'll be sure to link the Last Way Home as I send this out there as well. Well,
Thank
as we're finishing off our time together, Jordan, is there anything that you'd like to um, share with us, kind of just as some final thoughts or encouragement?
you. The first thing that comes to mind is just another thing that really you've underscored for me, which is a big part of my mental health journey that I don't talk about a lot, which is physical fitness.
Mhm.
I know you speak about that a lot. I know that was a big shift in your personal journey. That's something that I measure my meditation practice with, my vulnerability, my truth, my honesty with. My body needs to express itself just the same, right? I need to work out, I need to exercise, I need to move my body, and I think that's something that, despite your championing that message, it's often lost as a piece of the mental health puzzle.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it's the most quickly impactful thing that we can do for our mental health, just to get up and move our bodies in some way, shape, or form. So that's not normally my message, but maybe it's because I'm here with you. I feel like I'm gonna close with that. I want to share
Okay.
that, or reinforce, or mirror back to you what you offer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It has been a joy to reconnect with you, brother.
Yeah. Oh, likewise, Noah. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Progress Podcast.